a playlist original.
No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, Spider-Man killed my father. I want this guy dead. The ones I love will always be the ones who pay.
Do you love me or not?
Am I not supposed to have what I want?
I'm getting married, and I can't keep thinking about you.
I want a life of my own. I'm Spider-Man. No more.
You look different.
There was something I thought I had to do. I don't have to.
You take Spider-Man's pictures. Where is he?
I believe there's a hero in all of us, even though sometimes we have to give up the thing we want the most.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another rendition of Back to the Blockbuster with your hosts, Gaius and Jackson. A little leftover episode for you guys from the month of June. We are covering the 20th anniversary of Spider-Man 2, recording, as Gaius just mentioned off camera, on July the 8th. So for those of you that have been anticipating this episode for the month of June, wait no longer. Thanks for tuning in, guys, on another one. We just did throw on our socials what we'll be covering for the month of July for anniversaries and our listeners pick too. If you can, guys, go have a look at that and see what's on deck for the month. But last anniversary episode for the month of June is coming to you guys today. Very excited for this one. I think a lot of people were excited for it. It was a huge movie when it came out back in 2004. I have fond memories. This is one that I do remember seeing in theaters, even though I was
there young. We go.
Was big into Spider-Man as a kid, loved it.
Finally, you got one.
Yeah. And I had all the toys, all the gear. My birthday was around this time of year too. So I can't remember what actual day. I'm sure you have it in front of you. It came out, but I'm a June 17th baby. So I remember seeing these around my birthday when they all came out.
Nice. Me in a different way, since I'm a little older, but I also saw this in theaters on opening day. It was a huge movie for me and my friends to go see because we loved the first Spider-Man. And I think growing up, as far as the comic books and stuff, either Spider-Man comic books or X-Men comic books were my favorite growing up. So I was just so impressed with what Sam Raimi did with the first movie because it really felt like, at least at that time, you were watching the character come right out of the comic book when you were watching
yes.
it. I was like, how can you possibly, create, in live action, this person who's swinging from building to building and make that look genuinely
still
real
looks
and exciting.
Incredible 20 years later.
And, right. So in that first movie, I was like, all right, they really sold it. And it was and that first movie was a huge deal when it came out that summer. And this was another huge deal when it came out in 2004. It was, I know a lot of people were anticipating it. There was a lot of, I don't think people were worried because but it came out during a time that was good for some of these superhero sequels. Because we got X2 the year before this, I believe, and that was considered an improvement over the first movie. And at least critically, I'll see what you think of this, but critics really love Spider-Man 2. A lot of them have called it one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, and they think it actually influenced a lot of superhero movies that followed. So at least on that from that standpoint, it was seen as an improvement over the original film. And I think I would have to say I agree with most of that sentiment because I feel like this one, I think comic movies work best when they're not just about comic book stuff and they throw kind of mix things up and put in real world scenarios. And honestly, Spider-Man 2 is a Peter Parker movie first. It feels like this is of him
very much so
going through this struggle of trying to maintain a normal life and also maintain this responsibility that he's taken on as Spider-Man. And you actually can relate to this movie a lot better once you get older. Painfully, there's the job stuff, conflicts with friends, the situation with the girl. There's a lot of it in that you really learn to appreciate a lot when you're older, and I think that's why the movie, at least for me, because I hadn't watched it in a little bit, but while I was watching it today for this, all that kind of joy of watching it came back from when I first saw it in theaters, but then also really paying attention to they really felt like they put story first and character first over action and spectacle. It seemed like that action and spectacle serves the story and not the other way around. And
Yes.
I don't know. I thought that was really good thing that they did, and it really helped kind of build the emotional weight of the movie itself as well.
I completely agree. And to answer your question about, the critical consensus of this movie, I completely agree, especially upon watching it. It had been a long time. I'd seen the first one not that long ago, like within the last 2 or 3 years, I consider fairly recent. And then this not long after, but I felt like it had been a while. Like there were some things, I think I remembered most of the movie, but like just kind of really absorbing it, knowing and anticipating that I'd be talking about it actually, instead of just throwing it on for a mindless watch. Like, damn, does it ever hit? Like, what a well-crafted, not just superhero comic book movie, but sequel that this is. And like, it fits so great as like the meat of the Spider-Man trilogy, like sandwich. It expands upon so many great things from the first movie and sets up some great stuff to be followed in Spider-Man 3. But I think just to touch on what you mentioned about like the kind of the personal conflict that Peter Parker's dealing with in this movie it was so refreshing just to see that everything that is impacting him and making him kind of doubt his place and position as Spider-Man was so realistic and grounded. And it was nice not to just have these world ending or New York ending stakes like every superhero movie seems to have in the era after this movie comes out. Like it just typical things that any like young person can relate to. Like you said, like him losing the job, his friction and falling out with Mary Jane and Harry, him coming to terms with, telling Aunt May about his role in Uncle Ben's death, like all these things all happening at the same time and dragging him down are just so relatable. And instead of just having some, I don't know, alien force come to blow up New York City, like how everything seems like it's like that these days. I don't know. It really resonated with me with this watch in particular.
Yeah, I agree. And I was actually surprised too, because like you mentioned, there are so many story beats in this movie. There are so many like arcs that have to get resolved and like have great attention paid to him. And in lesser hands, I think some of those character arcs and story beats would have been a little mishandled, or one would get like a little disservice over the other. But they all are really well done, and they get enough attention, every single one of them. I mean, like you said, it's the stuff with Peter and Mary Jane, and it's the whole conflict with him and Harry, and then he has to worry about like you said, telling his aunt about his role in Uncle Ben's death, and also worrying about her because her house is almost like foreclosure. Yeah, and and then his life, he lives in a really shitty apartment. He's dealing with that. He's not getting, because of his responsibilities as Spider-Man, he can't really fully commit to like the piece of job that he has at the beginning of the movie. That's why he ends up losing that. And then he doesn't want to keep giving pictures to the Daily Bugle, where they keep basically labeling Spider-Man as like a menace, as J. Jonah Jameson.
Funny how that's so relatable, even more so today with media manipulation.
Yeah, and then like he finally has to like give in and give them what they want because he needs money, and then you feel every parts of those things it's really well told, and then you throw in like a new villain, and even his backstory is really like well thought out, and it gets enough screen time to really like he's not like a typical villain. There's there's a little bit of sorrow in him, and like you can kind of feel bad that this thing happened to this brilliant man, and that arc is really well done too. So I was surprised that in any other comic movie, like I think we've seen that a lot, where there's like, oh, there's too many things going on, and something's gonna fall by the wayside, but that does not happen in this movie at all.
No, Doc Ock is a great villain. I think like probably one of the stronger ones of this trilogy. And I, again, like Green Goblin, even though Green Goblin from the first movie is, I guess, a little bit more animated and comic book appearing, Doc Ock is just so human. Like his very human flaws are what bring him down and make him a great villain, like his hubris and his ego, and wanting to, control, harness the power of the sun. And he lets that, he bites off more than he can chew, and then won't allow himself to shut it down. And that, ends up, catapulting the movie forward. But I love that comparing to like the next movies like Venom and Sandman, which are very clearly like bordering on the supernatural and alien.
Yeah.
I think that drags Spider-Man 3 down a little bit, where it kind of leaves the realm of realism, but where I think that really works for this movie. And Doc Ock is just a great villain. One thing though that I'm curious to know is why the molding of these arms to his spine, gives him superhuman like strength and endurance. I find this kind of
Yeah.
funny. Watching Spider-Man punch him, and that would probably like kill a normal person, and he's just kind of it brushes it off. I found myself chuckling at that during the movie.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, especially when you have him up against Spider-Man, who is stronger than a normal person because of the abilities that he got from a radioactive spider. So yeah, they don't really explain how Doc Ock is suddenly like impervious to harm. It seems like,
but it doesn't need to be explained. It's just for fun, and
Yeah.
I didn't find. I honestly just kind of had fun with it. It's like kind of an oversight if you really want to get technical with it, but all the same, like I thought it made him a good villain that he could compete with Spider-Man.
Yeah. And just in case people well, it's 20 years, so I'm sure you guys have seen it. Anybody, if you haven't, but let you know that the movie is set 2 years after the events of Spider-Man, and the film finds Peter Parker struggling to stop scientist Dr. Otto Octavius from recreating the dangerous experiment that killed his wife and left him neurologically fused to mechanical tentacles, while also dealing with an existential crisis between his dual identities that appears to be stripping him of his powers. I actually forgot. I don't know why I forgot this angle. That it does strip him of his powers for some of the movie.
Love that.
And I thought that was so cool because like in real life, any kind of stress can affect your body like that, right? So that was another like real like world, thing that they threw in there to kind of give you more like you're watching it as an adult, you're like, all right, I get it. Like he's going through stuff. And like when you go to finally find out what it is, and the guy is like, well, I think it's all up here, and you're like, yep, it's all in his head, and it's the stress is what's causing his body to react that way. So I thought that was another good story element to add into
one of
it.
my favorite parts of this movie.
And also gives him incentive when he thinks he is completely losing his powers, that he's like, all right, I don't have to be Spider-Man anymore. I can give it up. And and then he soon realizes that, of course, New York needs him. And but yeah, I loved that part of it, because that would give that'd be a good excuse for someone like Peter Parker, who's like, I'm already struggling with like trying to like keep up with these dual identities. Like now that I don't have that power anymore, like there's no need for Spider-Man to really exist.
And then we see the implications of that in a scene that I initially kind of thought was out of place, but that I've kind of reflected on a little bit, and I kind of have changed my mind on it and feel like it belongs and actually adds more than I realize, is the burning building scene in this movie, which I thought, there's a burning building scene in Spider-Man 1. Why are we doing this? It kind of just feels like almost like it was like a reshoot or something added in there for more, I don't know, stakes or tension. But I thought about it afterwards. I was like, no, like this comes at the time. The scene happens after Peter kind of hangs up the suit, quits, and is focusing on his, other curriculars and sets Spider-Man aside. But here comes this challenge, this call to call him to still, be a hero when it counts, even though he's not in the suit. And I thought that kind of like, it then inspires him to pick up the suit again and continue being Spider-Man. And that wasn't clear to me at the beginning. I just thought like, this just seems like an out of place scene. It's also, borrowing from another scene in the first movie, but anyway, I do think it adds a lot to the story after reflecting on it. And it's not, wholly original. I think maybe there could have been some other way to bring him back into wanting to be Spider-Man again. But ultimately, I think the scene serves its purpose.
Yeah, I believe so too. And I guess it's a good kind of counter, like, even though those scenes are very similar, the one for the first one and then that scene. But I guess it does show, like, the key difference, like in that. So in the first movie, he's clearly has all his powers. He's Spider-Man, and then this one, he gets to kind of do that as Peter Parker, right? Like out of the suit, everything. So yeah, I can see your point though, because like it would seem like it's out of place at first, but I guess in the greater scheme of things, it's good that it's there because it showcases that. I know one thing that I definitely didn't get much when I saw this 20 years ago, and definitely get now. As a younger person, used to be so annoyed by Mary Jane in the movie. I was like, oh, why is she just so mad? Or like, why is she just
she's hard on
doing? Why is she doing this? And
yeah,
and honestly, watching now as an adult, I get it. I mean, it's still kind of, there are certain moments that are so like, man, she have to give him a hard time, because she also has an inkling that he is Spider-Man. Like that,
right?
That inkling has been there. So the assumption should be like, hey, he's not just like bailing on me because he wants to bail, or he's avoiding me because he wants to avoid me. There's maybe a deeper reason there. But I do think that relationship, even though it's very complicated and borderlines on like the dramatic a little bit. It feels so raw and real because I'm pretty sure a lot of people have been in those kind of relationships where you're like, you want to be together but you can't, like that kind of thing. And then the whole like push and pull that they go through. And yeah, that's another thing I watched as an adult. I was like, I appreciate the way this relationship is depicted a lot more than I did when I saw it in theaters.
I love to, like, spoiler alert, I guess my point is jumping towards the end of the movie, but when she does realize who he is and that he's been juggling the second identity, and you can kind of like instantly see on her face that she realizes the burden he's been carrying and why he's not been able to fully commit. I just think it's a great moment for their character. And I actually kind of forgot, I think more like on my last watch of this, that she finds out in this movie. So I thought that, I was like, oh, this is earlier than I remember, but I do remember they're like due to be married at the beginning of Spider-Man 3, but I haven't seen that movie, I don't even think, since theaters. So
I haven't seen it.
It's been a long time. I need to go back to it. Yeah.
that might be on another anniversary episode, because I'll just say this. I remember seeing that on opening day too and being so excited because Spider-Man 2 was so good. And then when I saw Spider-Man 3, I was like, this is not as good.
Not as good. There's some cringy moments in there too.
Yeah, there are too many cooks in that kitchen. There are just too many villains. Yeah. I mean, I know they included Venom because the studio really wanted them to. Sam Raimi was really big on Sandman, and they were like, no, we want Venom too. And there's like a lot of things that went wrong with Spider-Man 3. But it's interesting because there's a lot being juggled in that movie, similar to this one almost. Yeah. But it doesn't have that same problem though, even though that it is dealing with a lot of story, pretty much.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my favorite moments or like parts about this movie, if you're a fan of Sam Raimi, you'll know his partner in crime, Bruce Campbell, usually appears. I was actually waiting to bring this up because I wanted to see if if he cameos in the other two movies. I can't remember if he was in the first, but his little scene as the what is he? The what do you call him?
Like an usher, I guess.
The usher, yeah.
At the play that she's in, yeah.
Yeah, so a couple Evil Dead references in this movie, which are great. The hospital scene and the chainsaw is great, but yeah, seeing Bruce Campbell and his whole little parlay with Tobey Maguire when he's going to see the play, I thought was absolutely hilarious. I love Bruce Campbell as an actor and like love seeing him pop into Sam Raimi films, so it's always something I'm looking at. And I didn't remember. I knew he would be popping up kind of like a Stan Lee, something you're always looking out for, but I did not remember when he came in.
I think he's the announcer
in the wrestling.
Other thing in the first one. Yes. I don't remember what he does in the third one, or if he does anything in the third one.
I think you're right about the first. So now that you mention it,
that scene is so strong and it's funny. Yeah. And actually, they're both playing off each other really well. Because the good thing about Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, and I like different things about each person who has played Spider-Man so far. Like there's things that Andrew Garfield did that I thought really worked, and I think what really helps Tom Holland is that he was a bit more age appropriate to begin playing Spider-Man. So you definitely got like the younger Spider-Man vibe when he first started. But Tobey Maguire has this like earnest like thing about him that you kind of can see in his face, like he's kind of wide-eyed. I don't know. There's just something about him that's like pretty endearing as the character.
Very innocent.
Yeah. So his whole face during that scene as he's just walking in, like just ready to just go through the door, and he's like kind of stops him and like first mentions his shoes and then makes him like fix his tie, and like he looks so earnest while doing it too.
Yeah, and he's like, "Can I help you?"
yeah. And he's not gonna be able to go in, and I think what really helps you understand Peter Parker's dilemma and feel sorry for him because of that dilemma is because of Tobey Maguire's performance. You feel every bit of like frustration. Like, I mean, the whole time I was watching, I was like, dude, the hits keep coming for this guy. Like, I kind of forgot how much he goes through throughout the entire movie. But a lot of that is being sold by Tobey Maguire himself because he really seemed like he really invested in playing that part. And I kind of get why some people still think he's their best Spider-Man. I mean, I think it might be depends on who,
right.
Might be a generational thing depending on which movies you grew up with.
Probably, like most things are, yeah.
But he definitely, I mean, holds his own in that part. And like it's funny because like I remember when he got cast in the first movie, it made sense since Peter Parker is supposed to be kind of nerdy and all that. But even back then I was like, I don't quite buy him as an action guy, but I guess you don't really buy Peter Parker as one either in the comic book. So it works.
I guess most of the action he's hidden by the suit too, right?
True. So we don't. That'd be a stuntman most of the time.
What was Tobey Maguire known for before being cast? I know that he was Leonardo DiCaprio's buddy in the 90s, and they did some work
Best
together. I know
friend,
he had a small role in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which is hilarious. His haircut in that movie like makes me burst out laughing every time I see him. But this is what put Tobey Maguire on the map for me, at least. Like, I always grew up knowing who he was because of Spider-Man, but very few roles have I seen of his pre-Spider-Man 1. So I was kind of curious, did you know of him before?
So I knew of him a little bit because he was in Pleasantville, and I had seen.
Oh yeah, Pleasantville. Yeah, I didn't see it until years later.
And then I also I saw Wonder Boys, which I really like. It's like him and Michael Douglas, Katie Holmes, Robert Downey Jr. It's a really good movie. Oh. He mostly did smaller movies though, right? So like this was really his like big, like blockbuster like tentpole role. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that he's Leonardo DiCaprio's best friend, because Leonardo DiCaprio famously told Timothy Chalamet not to do, superhero movies. And his best friend did 3 or 4, technically, he did No Way Home as well.
Right.
So I always wonder if that ever came up in conversation between the two of them. Like, well, I did a few, and then that came out all right.
True that. Yeah. Although, actually, great segue, because I'm pretty sure famously or infamously in this movie, Tobey Maguire like really hurt his back and has had like long, like lasting back issues since. And I think it comes from the stunt where his webs fail him in midair and he kind of falls through and like smokes that. I don't know if he lands on like a vent or if he lands on a car, but he actually jokes about it. Like, he stands up and he's like, "Oh, my back!" And like,
my back. Oh yeah, that's when he falls.
I'm pretty sure that was it was the car. Yeah, I think that was a legit scene where he injured himself. Is that not it? Do I have that wrong?
I know he injured himself filming either, like, because I know they made a mention of it because they thought they were going to have to replace him at one point, and Jake Gyllenhaal was one of the names that got brought up, which makes sense because they kind of look alike.
They do kind of look alike, yeah.
I'm glad that didn't happen though. But yeah, he really did injure himself, and I think he still deals with it today.
I think so.
That's why I know. Yeah, you always wonder too how much action he's doing in the movie, because, like you said, he is in the suit with a mask on,
right?
So I've always wondered, like, how much of that is Tobey Maguire and how much of that is his very good stuntman.
On that note, so I was just just disclaimer, I watched this last week, so I'm a little bit fuzzy. I had to, do some homework afterwards because some of the movie had kind of left my brain since then, but I was just kind of going through the trivia, and supposedly, according to Sam Raimi anyway, the scene where I believe it's when he's on his way on his moped to go to Mary Jane's play, and he has to like backflip off his bike. Do you remember that scene? Yeah, today. Apparently, so that was filmed with Tobey doing that stunt and a stuntman, and Sam Raimi said that he liked Tobey's take better, and so that's actually doing that.
That's awesome.
Crazy. And I know that he did do some stunts, like very famously in the first movie, he does the cafeteria lunch tray after like
I forgot takes. How. Yeah, I when I found out that was actually real, I was like,
my God.
Are you serious? And the amount of time that probably got screwed up, he said it probably was like over 100 times.
It literally was like 120 takes or something like that.
That's crazy.
Never would that be done today, which I think is another thing that adds to the charm.
Nope.
And love or hate Spider-Man 3, like they're just so much practicality in them.
I know movies are all about time, man. Like spending that much time on one scene and like, oh man, like can't we just CGI this thing?
And how do you not, like, when he actually completely does it and is successful, how do you not like break character and like scream for joy?
Yeah.
But he just plays it so cool.
I know the one thing that Sam Raimi was worried about with Spider-Man 2. Kirsten Dunst and Tobey Maguire, I think they dated while making the first one, or they dated a little after it. They had broken up before they did Spider-Man 2.
Ooh,
and so he was really worried that it was gonna mess up their chemistry because they weren't like boyfriend and girlfriend anymore.
Right.
But it ended up being that they were both professional and adults, and
good.
And they actually do have really good chemistry. And
they have great chemistry.
Yeah. I mean, you feel that kind of like deep forever love when he looks at her, and you get the same thing when she looks at him and when she's talking to him. Like you buy the relationship completely, even the complicated parts of it too.
Yes, I love that because he's so held back and withdrawn and won't commit to her because of the problems that him being Spider-Man would bring to that relationship, that she, painful as it might be, like tries to pursue other avenues, starts dating John Jameson. because she has her own life to live, and like that's such a real human aspect of that relationship that really, really drives their chemistry forward and kind of lights that fire underneath Peter. I think that's a great moment in or part of the story is when she's kind of moving on and trying to give him his last shot, and he still won't do it, and comes together so sweetly at the end where she finds out who he is and kind of tells it to him, like, who are you to make this decision for me? If I want to be with you, it's up to me to take on that risk. I just think one of the best parts of the relationship is in this movie.
That dialogue too is really well written. Like, because like that is what I think anyone would say. I think she says something along the lines like, I know why you're doing this, but can you have enough respect for me to like make my own choice? Like, and that is that's the right thing to say. She gets it. Like, he doesn't want her, he has a lot of enemies. He doesn't want her to be in danger, but he can't take that choice away from her either. I mean, it's her choice, it's her life. So like I think that button on that last scene, because like sometimes comic movies kind of they think they have to end with something like really big and grand. And I actually like that this movie ends on that note, even though I thought it was shitty how she left the guy at the altar, like
at the altar
with a note from her friend.
That's tough.
And that was a little rough, but I mean, it was a nice little button.
They were also like getting married after being together for like realistically a few months. So it's like, was that really destined to work out? I don't know.
Yeah. And she clearly jumped in that relationship because she was trying to get over Peter. It seemed like the only time I felt like a tinge of like, that was a kind of a bitchy thing to do was when she did tell him she was seeing someone, because it came like, she's almost said it as like an insult. Like, I'm seeing someone now. And he's like, what? Like, basically trying to gauge what his reaction would be, like what he would say. And
I get that though from her. As much as it sucks for Peter, she's here thinking that he's not taking the relationship seriously, and she wants that with him, and he can't even make the 8 o'clock curfew or curtain for her to the show. So I feel like it was a well-timed point to mention that, as shitty as it is, because we as the audience are seeing all these other things that Peter is balancing and they're compounding on him. And then here comes this, the biggest one with Mary Jane is being with somebody else. But from her perspective, not knowing what he's juggling, I completely get that move to tell him that as she did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one part of my brain is like, I get it. And then the other part of me was like, well, what if I was him, I'd be like, oh, wow, thanks.
Yeah.
For letting me know. By the way, it sounds like we're talking about a relationship drama and not a comic book movie.
I know,
like,
right?
this is a lot of what the movie is, though. I mean, because like on the other side of it, there is his relationship or friendship with Harry. That's kind of complicated by the fact that, well, at first Harry just thinks that he knows Spider-Man,
right?
And he feels some kind of way about that because he thinks Spider-Man killed his father. And that's kind of pushed them apart, but they're trying to be. And also, Harry's changed a lot too. Like James Franco, I also forgot that we canceled him for a little bit because he was in a lot of stuff and like during this time period, and like he was a big deal. So I was watching it, I was like, I forgot that he used to be such a huge deal during this time, and he actually is really good in the movie. Like I like the change from like Harry from the first to second one because he is taking on his dad's mantle pretty much like at Oscorp, so his personality would change. So he kind of plays up the whole like rich ego businessman thing in certain scenes, which actually really does work too. But then he has some really good emotional stuff too. Like when he takes off Spider-Man's mask and sees that it's Peter, his reaction, like that stunned kind of reaction, it looks so genuine, and like you feel that, and like and at that point, like Peter even kind of is like fully waking up, like realizing what is going on. He's like, oh fuck, well, he knows. But we have other things to deal with because I gotta find Mary Jane, and like I just love that Harry cares about Mary Jane too. They were friends and they dated, I think, at one point.
In the first one, which I always found so weird.
Yeah, so clearly he wouldn't want anything to happen to her, but like he's so stunned by like what he's just learned that he's kind of talking around that at first, like just mentioning like you killed my father and like all this, So I don't know if James Franco gets enough credit for what he does particularly in this second movie, but he's also quite good at that. I actually think that way that plays out too is really well done and gets enough screen time where you actually feel like that. Oh, that it sucks that friendship is going to fully end at that point.
Yeah, I just think the tension between them building from the first to the second movie is really geniusly helmed. Like you completely believe why Harry would be at odds with Peter, although he's still trying to reconcile that they're best friends and they care about each other and they've been friends forever. But you can just see that knife, that wedge being driven into Harry, and it's widening and widening as the movie goes because he cannot accept that who he thinks Peter is legit friends with Spider-Man, and he believes Spider-Man killed his father. And, you know, I just love that how he portrays that getting the best of him more and more with each scene that we see him in is just really, really well held and just a believable roadblock for that friendship.
Yep. Oh, what I did forget, it caught me off guard. I don't know why I started laughing because it's never right to hit anyone. But when he's pissed off at Peter at that event that they're at, he like slaps him like 2 times. I totally forgot about that.
Oh, is that right?
Eh? Yeah, and it's a full on what some people would call like a bitch slap, I guess.
Yeah.
I was like, and then I was just thinking like, man, it'd be hard for me to be like to not like throw out all my super Spider-Man powers at that point after he just not once but twice,
right? Yeah.
I had totally forgot about that moment, and it also Tobey Maguire's face is like so genuinely like shocked. So I was like, it made me like I think I giggled because I was like uncomfortable. I was like, oh Jesus, like
it is very uncomfortable. Yeah,
this happening in front of everyone, and everyone's all like gasping in the background. Like I totally forgot about it. A good scene between the both of them, but I totally forgot that he slaps him 2 times for good measure.
Definitely. I can't remember what he says to him though, because again, like I'm like a week off this watch. I can't remember what the dialogue is, what he's confronting him about. Just that he's hiding behind Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah. And just like 2 little, like, oh man.
I will say, like, all the stuff about James Franco and afterwards, like going back and seeing him in this role, it does seem off-putting to me. Like I guess I forgot again to your point about how significant he was in the 2000s and what a rising star he was. Like I look at it now and just think like knowing what he's been accused of, I don't even really know where all that went. I just kind of vaguely remember it from back in the like late 2010s, but I just look at him now and just think like it just makes me feel some type of way. He's the one part of like that series that, and I do think he's perfectly passable as Harry, but he's never like one of the parts of these movies that I'm going back and remembering his performance. It's never been something that's really stood out to me. And so I'm just watching it right now. I'm like, who else would I have put in this role? Or it's just been, I don't know how to just put a pin on it.
That's interesting that you said that. Cause I think he's fine in the first one. I think he's really good in this one because, the different emotions that he's selling. But I also agree with you when he was cast too for the first one, he didn't remind me of like, the Harry Osborn from like comic books or anything. Like nothing about him gave off that vibe. So I never thought like it was necessarily that he was miscast, but I was like always thinking like I probably think of someone else that could have done it. And not like I have anyone on the top of my list now.
Right.
At the time, I always thought like it felt like a really odd casting choice. Of course, I think they make it work because all three of those main characters across those 3 movies, like they did have good chemistry with each other. Like you buy the relationships basically. But yeah, I agree with you. It's something about it that seems like a little off, but then I also can't think of who I would have put in his place. I know I forgot the guy who plays him in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but he quite wasn't a Harry Osborn type to me either.
Is he only in the second one in those movies?
Yeah. I think his name is Dane DeHaan.
Oh, Dane DeHaan. Yeah. I knew that he was in those movies. I didn't know he played Harry Osborn though. Oh, he's the Goblin, right? Yeah.
So I also felt like, that doesn't really feel like Harry Osborn to me, but he good enough actors that you just dealt with it.
What does the Green Goblin look like in those movies?
Oh, he completely like almost transforms like a monster. Almost like his face gets all messed up, and he has like the full on like goblin teeth and everything. I forgot how because I haven't watched the second one The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Sorry, guys.
I never have seen it
in a really long time. That's another one that's gotten some revisionist history. Like it's not as bad as I remember it.
I've literally never even seen a shot. I don't think. Oh yes, I have. Oh boy. Interesting. Oh, he plays Norman.
Oh, did
he? Yeah. What the heck? Yeah. Says that's what Dane DeHaan's character is, Norman Osborn. That's weird.
Well, shit.
Oh,
I wonder if that was like a mistake. I wonder if that was a mistake on their part. I thought
it looks more like a zombie. in that. It was really
in that.
freaky looking, but his glider's pretty cool. Yeah, I've literally never seen that.
But yeah, it is weird to watch movies with certain like, James Franco was a huge thing, and like I was watching, I kind of course didn't forget that he was in this, but it definitely was like, oh, like like James Franco in his prime.
Yeah. Amongst the main cast, I guess I look back at it and now that think he looks like kind of misplaced. Like he's very like handsome, like good looking guy. Not to say that Tobey Maguire's not. I just feel like you said earlier, Tobey Maguire looks kind of like your typical what you'd think of Peter Parker, other than like obviously he's not very nerdy. I think they dress him up to look nerdy at some points in the movie, but James Franco, and I don't know how Harry's portrayed in the comics. He might be completely comic accurate for all I know, but he's got this $1 million smile, those like the curly locks, like he's just charming. Like he just seems like more like polished than both Mary Jane and Peter are in this movie, where they seem completely normal, everyday characters. And here's Harry is like this larger than life, like really recognizable actor, like good looking dude. Just seems like he's on a different level, but not in a necessarily a good way, just in a different way. I don't know. I always just found it odd looking back and remembering that he's in these movies and the role that he is, but I'll give it to him. I think he like plays the role of Harry well.
Yep. And I thought I remembered that he had more screen time in the movie. I mean, it's not like he's not in it like a lot, but like there's good chunks where like he's gone. There's good chunks of the movie where Mary Jane's not really there. I mean, because I guess you are doing. I mean, it is Peter Parker's story at the end of the day. But yeah, it's like it's funny how you just remember things differently. Like, oh, I thought they were in this movie a bit more, and like I don't remember. Like, I also remember like even with Doc Ock, I was like, there's sections of it where he's not really there much, but I feel like he was in it a lot more when I first saw it. But not that it's like shortchanged or anything. I just thought they had more screen time initially.
Speaking of screen time and forgetting, I don't know about you, but I completely forgot that Willem Dafoe was a cameo in this as Green Goblin. That was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. That was a bit comic book accurate, because when Norman Osborn does die, eventually Harry does take on that in the comic books, and in the very similar way where like how when Norman lost his mind, he started like seeing himself and hearing things, and like James and then Harry Osborn went through the same thing. So that I remember that being a cool little button towards the end of the second one, because I was like, oh, this is hopefully going to pay off really well in that third movie. But not exactly, because
I don't remember much. I know that Harry takes up the mantle, but I don't really remember much of how it goes. But I do think it was a great
just to throw in a third villain for no reason in the third movie,
who kind of turns good in the last moments.
But I thought that was a cool little thing to add into it. And it's funny because I was listening to the audio commentary a little bit before you came on, and they said that they were shooting a scene in New York and Willem Dafoe just walking down the street.
And saw the cast and crew,
and saw the cast and crew, and kind of like, what are you guys doing? And they said that helped with like making that kind of cameo thing come together a bit more, like
pretty cool.
Like, I thought that was kind of funny. Also, I just think it's funny that Willem Dafoe just be randomly walking down down the block.
I love Willem Dafoe so much.
Yeah, and he was actually well, I guess that's a good thing to ask you. From what you remember, between the two villains, Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, and then Doc Ock in this, which one do you think is better? Not necessarily like which actor is better, because they're both very good.
Yeah.
Because Alfred Molina actually kills this role. He's so good.
Oh man, he is great in this role.
Like he actually is menacing and pretty scary at certain points in the movie. But yeah, I was wondering which you thought paid off better villain wise.
Oh boy. See, I'm more far removed from the first one. I don't remember much of Willem's performance. I think actually earlier when I mentioned that I saw it a couple years ago, I was blending this movie with Spider-Man, or that movie with Spider-Man 2. I don't think I actually saw the first one as recently as I can admit. So I need to see it again before I could really answer that. But bottom line, Alfred Molina is incredible in this movie. He kills it as Doc Ock. One thing I thought was interesting about his character and him prepping for it, I guess he shot a movie before this one. I don't know what it was called, but it required him to gain some weight, and then he shed some pounds to, I guess, even though he's still a pretty broad, big dude in this movie. I wouldn't say he's out of shape by any means, but I guess he intentionally sculpted himself to resemble like a 1950s era weightlifter. And I think that he does a great job from the photos you see from of that sport back then, like, yeah, I think he really resembles that. So good on him. But he's a pretty physically imposing dude. So I think he'd be a threat without those arms.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, but
like, yeah, he looks pretty menacing.
Yeah, the arms are a pretty cool part of his costume, though. And I got to say, like, I think he did great too when he came back for No Way Home.
Oh, No Way Home. Yeah, I thought he was good. Yeah, I got, and he's has continued to speak very fondly of doing Spider-Man 2. Like, he considers it one of the best things he's done in his career, and he loved that. And like, I think when actors like that, when they aren't used to being in huge movies and they do one like this, it turns out good, and then they become recognized by he was like the first time like kids or anything noticed him. Like, they thought he was so cool that he was a part of that. So he was actually really happy to come back for No Way Home because he loved the character so much and loved the experience of making Spider-Man 2. So I thought that was cool that he still thinks pretty highly of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta say too, like, I think his speaking about Doc Ock more like as a villain, I think there's this movie, let alone in the trilogy, but just in comic book movies in general, has some of like the most iconic scenes from superhero movies. Is there a favorite like Doc Ock moment in this movie that you like, or a part where you really think Alfred Molina is on full display? I know that you just watched it, so
yeah, I'm trying. Actually, the stuff that he does, I guess near the climax of the movie, where Peter is trying to basically getting him to, we have to turn it off, and then he starts to like struggle with, like, he knows that what he needs to do, and like there's a good part of him that's still there, but then they're still controlling like his brain, and he's going back and forth. I think at one point it actually startled me a little bit because I forgot that one of the tentacles like reaches out and just grabs Peter by the throat while he's trying to decipher like what he should do. I thought Alfred Molina was really good at like going in and out of like who he was as a doctor and then who he became after the accident. And he was really good at playing that duality because they had to be completely different. I also love that basically the tentacles, Sam Raimi, I mean, I guess like having the horror movie background, even in that moment where he's trying to figure out what he should do and how he's trying to basically talk them down to do what he wants to do, the way they're moving around and like staring and they're like I guess I'm gonna say mouths, but are opening.
Yeah,
it feels like a horror movie. They feel like little monsters, like just attached to it, that's why I love this scene too, where they're about to perform the surgery on him. That scene feels like a total like
that is a huge standout. So I watched this movie with Cam a week ago, and we've talked about this scene in this movie several times just over the years, and we're just chatting about movies, and that hospital scene always comes up, and watching it again, it's like, it's wonderfully helmed, and you can totally see Sam Raimi hearkening back to his Evil Dead directing days, and it's like it's a great little. It almost feels like it's part of that series. Almost, it's completely 180 from the tone of the rest of the movie for the most part, but super great. Actually, one thing that I thought was a really cool detail, and I had no idea how they pulled this off, but remember the scene in the hospital sequence when that one nurse lady is dragged underneath the table and her nails like cut up the floor, and it's like, you think this is a metal floor, like how's that? Anyway,
right.
I guess they just made it out of wax. I'm like, simple, and it gets that really cool effect of her nails kind of drawing up on the floor. Anyway, cool little detail. I guess I thought. I'm
pretty sure someone got impaled in that scene. I was like, this is a lot for and I know it's PG-13, but I was like, it was interesting how it really played like a horror movie scene. Really great,
absolutely
great detail. Like,
it scared the shit out of lots of kids growing up. I don't remember like seeing it like that hot. Like, I remember lots about this movie when I was young, but I don't remember being scared by that scene. So I feel like I would be the type, because this came out when I was 5 turning 6. So I feel like that would definitely be enough to scare a kid, but I don't remember it. Maybe I just blocked it out, but I remember Cam saying that he was freaked out by the scene as a kid, and several comments say the same thing on YouTube videos and IMDb and whatnot, but it's in a great sequence.
The one scene that continues to make the movie for me, and I felt it again watching it today, the whole train sequence, then him having to like stop the train from like going off the tracks, and then them pulling him in and like being carried across all those people on the train, and then that moment of like they're like, he's just a kid, and like they have this situation. Like, I just think it's so well done. Like, the score is really good during that scene.
Danny Elfman's score is awesome.
And I love in that moment because like he's unmasked, right? And they all like, but like they don't know who Peter Parker is, but like he had a secret identity, and I just love when those two kids basically are like say that they won't tell anyone about who he is. It's just a really, it could easily have been a cheesy, really bad moment, and I actually think it probably is one of the better moments of the movie because that's when he kind of, I think, fully learns like, yeah, they need that city needs him, and and not everyone thinks he's a menace, and so I think that scene really works well still.
So I just read today earlier that those two boys that give him his mask back are Tobey Maguire's real life half brothers.
Oh, really?
Which is pretty cool. Yeah. I thought that was pretty neat for them to be included in that.
That's awesome. What do you think of the scene?
Oh, absolutely one of the better moments, just like in terms of the direction and moving the story forward. I mean, that is one of the infamous scenes that I did remember and was anticipating. I love to like just the fight because I know like really the crux of that scene is Doc Ock damaging the controls and leaving Peter to stop the train from crashing. But their little actual one-on-one fight, like before that happens on the train, is awesomely directed, like really, really well. That sequence again, I don't know how they make this work, but with him dodging the oncoming train by like flattening himself on the train that he's on. Like just again, like 20 years later, those effects are just flawless looking. And I just won actually.
Well, best visual effects, right?
Won best visual effects too, which is no surprise. I don't know if it was nominated for 3 total, but I don't know what the first one.
I think it was like I think I saw sound editing and sound mixing or something that I got
nominated for. Yeah. Are you talking about the first or the second?
Oh, the second one.
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, there's this moment where like that old man, like when he tries one way to stop it and it doesn't work, and that guy's like, "You have any more bright ideas?" I was like, "Man, he's trying to save you guys' life."
Yeah,
like, I got a couple.
Yeah, true. That it's like appreciate some help when it comes, my man.
And I also love too that like when Doc Ock gets back on the train after he stops it, and then all of them are like, if you want to get to him, you got to go through us. And I think I love the solidarity of that moment. And then also Alfred Molina is perfect, like, okay. And then they just pushes them out the way, like to get to him. Oh, that was really cool too.
The first one was also nominated for visual effects, but didn't win. I'm trying to think of what it would have lost to from 2002, but very deserving visual effects win for Spider-Man 2 at least because it looks incredible.
Yeah, it looks great.
All of that. I don't think I saw a shot that I didn't like.
That moment with him and Mary Jane, they're sitting at I think it's like a diner or something, where they're having that conversation and the car comes through the window. That looks great still too. And I remember that being in the first trailer for the movie. That's how the trailer opened. It opened with like this whole like that dialogue exchange where she's like, "Do you love me or not?" And like it's playing like more of like an emotional movie at first, and then that sequence happens in the trailer. I thought that was like so cool that they did that to promote the movie initially. Yeah,
it's funny. I had this moment. I would have bet money that if I had told you before watching this last week that he was at that diner with Aunt May, I didn't think he was there with Mary Jane, and then to see him sitting there, I was like, this is like a Mandela effect moment. Like I would have swore that that's who he was there with in the scene. Maybe this is another diner scene with him and Aunt May at some other point in the series. But what I find hilarious, as well as that scene is crafted and does great for the story, I think it's hilarious and kind of an oversight. It's just it's just a dumb like comic book action movie scene, but underneath like that scene right before Doc Ock goes to Harry and is like basically demanding the rest of that tritium for his experiment, and then Harry counters him with, "Okay, go find Peter to get Spider-Man. If you kill Spider-Man, I'll give you all the tritium, no questions asked." And then so here's Doc Ock going to try and find Peter to rustle him up and get him to admit where Spider-Man is, and his first plan of action is to throw a car at him. And then, which like if
make sure you don't kill him.
He just thinks Peter's a human, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious. And then even they fight a little bit, and then Doc Ock throws Peter at the wall and demolishes the wall, and all this debris falls. And I'm like, this would kill him if you thought that he was a human. So it's just I laugh every time that happens because he obviously has no regard for Peter's life. But
that was funny, actually. And it's funny when you think about it. He thinks he's just following him because he'll know where Spider-Man is, and he needs him to tell him. But
yeah, hilarious.
Can't do it if he's unconscious, man.
Or dead.
Did you? Apparently, the movie went through a lot of drafts before they got to this one.
And,
really? I just read what they had originally. I'm glad they changed it, but they said one draft had a younger version of Dr. Octavius, who becomes infatuated with Mary Jane. His mechanical limbs use endorphins to counteract the pain of being attached to his body, which he enjoys. When he injures two muggers on a date, this horrifies Mary Jane, and in the resulting battle with Spider-Man, his tentacles are fused together, and the fusion begins to kill him. In the script, Octavius is the creator of the genetically altered spider from the first film and gives Peter an antidote to remove his powers. This means when Octavius is dying with his tentacles, he wants to extract Spider-Man's spine to save himself. This leads to an alliance with Harry, which they did keep in the final draft of what we saw.
Okay.
And it says beforehand, Harry and the Daily Beagle put a $10 million price on Spider-Man's head, causing the city's citizens to turn against him. So that was the original.
That's a cool angle.
That part of it sounds cool.
I don't think I would have liked it. No,
like young Doc Ock,
wanting to be with Mary Jane. It's cool though how like the different way that they kind of played with Spider-Man losing his powers by like extracted, like having an antidote to the radioactive spot. That's pretty neat.
Yeah,
so you can see how that evolved and kept in the final draft.
Instead, they were just like, make it realistic. He's stressed out.
Yeah,
that's why he's losing. That's why he's losing his
Such
powers.
a simpler answer and works so much better.
Let's not overthink it. He's just really stressed out. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. That it's so crazy how movies change between like certain drafts and scripts. And I wonder. Like, I'm glad they ended up with this. So this is a much more grounded. Weird to say grounded story in a movie like this, but it is pretty grounded for what it is. And I'm glad they did really like overthink everything like that. And also the change of character and making him younger for Doc Ock. I think that would have been a disservice to that character as well.
I think he's his ultimate portrayal and how he turned out was great. I'm just looking into the credited writers of this one. Obviously, Steve Ditko and Stan Lee are credited as the creators of Spider-Man, but Alfred, I'm guessing he pronounced his last name as Go. Do you recognize him? Have you looked at his filmography before?
No, but I can.
Because he's got some pretty. I'm looking at him right now, and he's actually got some pretty cool credits under his name. Obviously, he wrote.
Oh, he did
this
Shanghai. He did Shanghai Noon, Shanghai Nights, Spider-Man 2. Oh, he did the third Mummy movie.
I was looking at that.
His credits are all over the place.
Over the place.
Because I just saw Herbie Fully Loaded and Hannah Montana the movie. It's also in his filmography.
Oh yeah, look at that. Check out the top though. He created Wednesday, which is pretty neat.
Oh yeah,
I wouldn't have guessed that. So it's pretty neat. What is Shanghai Nights and Shanghai Noon? I've heard of them, but don't know what they are.
I know. I haven't seen them in so long, but I know Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson are in them.
What a combo!
And comedy. I remember the first one I saw a long time ago, like when it came out. I remember liking it then, but I haven't seen it in a really long time. And I actually never saw the sequels. I'm not.
A 2000s comedy. They were made differently back then. I bet you that'd be funny. Lucy Liu's in it too. Anyway, not to get off track, but I guess anyway, I was just surprised. I'd never really looked at any of the writers of any of the Spider-Man movies before, but some pretty big talent behind them.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, also something with movies like this is it looks like they're like let's see, one official screenwriter, and then like the story was conceived by another person, and then along with that writing team of the people you just mentioned, there's like 4 people that were involved in kind of crafting this script at one point or another. And I guess that's also why I think it's gonna like change from like early development to what the final product will be. But I'm really glad that they went with what they ended up going with, because I think to overcomplicate that story, it would have probably would have had the same dilemma that Spider-Man 3 had.
Yeah, honestly,
by overcomplicating it a bit. And I also other actors that were considered for Doc Ock were Ed Harris, Chris Cooper, and Christopher Walken. I cannot see Christopher Walken doing this.
Ed Harris, I think, would be pretty cool as a villain in this. I don't know necessarily about Doc Ock, maybe, but I think he'd be a great villain, like comic book villain.
Yeah,
his voice alone.
Do you have like a? Oh yeah, you asked about the Doc Ock thing. What was your kind of moment with Alfred Molina, like as an actor, and that you thought stood out?
Well, I think my favorite moment with him, overall in the movie, is like the hospital scene, but not necessarily for his acting, just because it's
Right,
really
right.
his arms doing the majority of the work in that scene. But I think he's got some pretty tender moments that I really like. Really, I think the most you really get to see him act outside of like the villainous role is
Yeah.
His presentation at Oscorp, him talking to Peter, and I think he does a great job at showing how enthusiastic he is about him being on the brink of this scientific discovery and
Right.
harnessing fusion and everything. And I think he really sells that he wants to do better for humanity. I can't remember the line, but he says intelligence is not a what's he say? Not a gift, but a responsibility,
Or
or
a
not
privilege or something.
a privilege. Yeah, and
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to use it to do better for humanity, or you're wasting it. I really believe him in his philosophy when he's kind of
Yeah.
pitching that to Peter, which is like great. You can see Peter kind of like taking this in multiple ways without revealing it. You
Yeah.
can tell that and good on Tobey Maguire too. I think he's really convincing in that Otto Octavius is his mentor and he's soaking up every word. So yeah, those moments, I think, not the better moments of him in the movie because he has so much time to shine as the villain, but before he gets to be the villain, I think he's got some pretty convincing moments of just a humble scientist wanting to do better for the world, and before everything goes to shit.
Yeah,
But
pretty much.
the hospital sequence and the train sequence too are the standouts in this movie.
Yeah,
I actually really like that first fight they get into together, him and Spider-Man, where after he robs the bank, he's scaling that building with Aunt May.
Yeah.
Really, really great scene. I always found it funny too. I don't know if there's a broader reason for this. Did you not find it funny that when he's robbing the bank, he's like picking up bags of coins like it's some like SpongeBob cartoon? I'm like, why are they just big bags of coins here?
Yeah.
I get they're better weapons to utilize than bags of like bills, but I just thought that was kind of silly. But
that's funny.
Oh well.
I guess Alfred Molina, they said he referred to his tentacles as Larry, Harry, Mo, and Flo, with Flo being the top right tentacle as it was operated by a female grip and performed delicate operations like removing his glasses and lighting his cigar. They said they created a corset, a metal and rubber girdle, a rubber spine, and 4 foam rubber tentacles, which were 8 feet long and altogether weighed 100 pounds. The claws of each tentacle, which were called death flowers, were controlled by one puppeteer sitting on the chair. Each tentacle was controlled by 4 people who rehearsed every scene with Molina so they could give a natural sense of movement as if the tentacles were moving due to Octavius muscle movement. That's like the amount of detail,
God.
Because when I was watching it, I was like, I wonder how they did this. Because I know and the fact that a lot of like practical detail went into doing it before they probably enhanced a lot of it with special effects is pretty impressive. I think.
Really can't tell where they blend in the puppeteering with CGI. Like it just looks so natural. It's really, really great stuff. They worked really hard. I think actually Alfred Molina was credited as acknowledging like the effects team on this movie as like the hardest people he's ever seen work like on a movie set before, which and it's just great that all their work paid off with that Oscar win too.
Yep. And now Danny Elfman is a great composer. I mean, we were just talking about Danny Elfman when we covered Batman.
Yeah.
I don't hear like the main Spider-Man theme that opens the movie and closes it. I don't hear a lot of people bringing it up as like a really good, as like a classic good score, but it really
you're right.
It's a solid piece of music. And like
Batman one gets all the fame, right?
Yeah. I think it sets the tone for like what the movie is, and like it feels heroic as well.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I think it deserves to be mentioned a bit more in the kind of pantheon of I guess comic book film scores.
Justice for Danny Elfman. He does not have enough recognition. That poor guy.
It's funny. They said they said the film was scored by Danny Elfman because he composed the first film. However, it says during recording sessions, Elfman had a falling out with Sam Raimi, saying that composing Spider-Man 2 was a miserable experience.
Wow. I did read about it though, but I don't really know what the crux was about.
I don't either.
But then they collaborated years and years later again on something too.
Yeah, that's funny. They talked it out. I can't imagine Sam Raimi being difficult. I mean, but I don't know. It might be different when you're composing music for one of his movies.
Perhaps. Also, I know Sam Raimi has 2 brothers. I think Ted is the one he's cast
At
in
the
this
Daily
movie.
Daily Bugle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's in the first one or not, but it's kind of cool to see him pop out in there.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I know all this stuff is played for comedy, but J.K. Simmons is still one of my favorite things.
Love him, man.
Across all these movies, but he's hilarious in this one in particular. I love when I forgot the moment where it's clear that his son's being left at the altar, and he's like says something like, "Oh, call Deborah." She's like, "The caterer." And he's like, "Yeah, don't open the caviar."
Yeah,
like,
I love that moment
because they won't be celebrating. And then I love when Peter asks for when he gives him the new picture, he's like, "I'll give you $150 for it." And I forgot what the other price was. I think it was like $350. He's like, "What? Outrageous!" Like, fine, and he just gives him the money anyway. Like, he's so good in that part. And that is, I mean, that's another, like, even in that first movie, that was like, that is what feels like J. Jonah Jameson even sounds like on the page when you're reading his stuff. And he so good. Like one of the best things about these movies in general.
Honestly, I'm glad you brought that up. Like, there's a few moments in this movie that I think that have given us some very, very enduring memes, even 20 years later. Pizza time being a huge one. I see that on the internet still to this day. Hilarious when he plops down the 8 or 10 pizzas or whatever it is at the beginning of the movie. And then J. Jonah Jameson's laugh after Peter asks him if he can pay him up front for shooting at that event.
Oh yeah.
And then he cocks his head back and laughs like hysterically. And then he goes, "You serious?" Like, I still see those memes that like use like on the internet today. It's great moments from that movie. But he's one of the highlights, I think, of this entire trilogy is J. Jonah Jameson. I remember being shocked. I hadn't heard of J.K. Simmons for years until Whiplash came out in 2014. I was like, holy shit, that's J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah.
That was a big moment for me because I didn't really know him from anything else at the time. But he just lives and breathes this role, I think. And to see him come back too is it the end of Far From Home that he makes his first appearance?
Because he's is when Mysterio
outs him.
Outs him. Yeah.
That was awesome.
It was good to bring him back. Yeah. Oh. I also love when he like after Spider-Man's been gone, he's like clearly having a change of heart, and he's like he was like wrong about him, and then like Spider-Man comes to like take his suit back, and then like he just full on goes back to like
villain.
Villain.
He's
so good.
Yeah. Just the flip of the switch.
And like only other version of that character is I can recall, like now on the page is from like the animated show in like the 90s, and that's kind of how the character sounds a little. Okay. I wondering if that was like part of the inspiration for how he did the voice and all that stuff, but I don't know. He looks the part and sounds it to me. He's the best. One of the best things about the movie.
I think one of the best cast people in the movie, and even though he's kind of in a minor role.
Yeah, and also credit to Rosemary Harris, who plays Aunt May, who actually I think it helps that I got the reasoning. I mean, Sally Field was fine in The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 as the character, and I get because I think it's funny. I do get the joke of having Marissa Tomei be like hot Aunt May.
Right.
They get because they get a lot of mileage out of it. I'm like, all right, I kind of see what they're doing. But having someone actually looks like Aunt May, who is like older, more elderly, and has like that kind of warm like grandmother feeling. I think that is what was kind of missing in like the newer ones with Tom Holland with the character. Not to say that Marissa Tomei is bad, and I think she actually in No Way Home she probably does the best work in the movies that she was in, the Spider-Man movies, because she has more to do. But I don't know. I think you get a little bit more like this sensitivity from Rosemary Harris.
Very much so. I always did find it different. And like now when I think about Aunt May and what her role is in Peter's life, I think of Rosemary Harris and that elderly, sweet, innocent, kind of like motherly stand-in. But I did find it odd, like looking back on it as I've gotten older and just kind of thought like, it doesn't really impact the movie for me. But like when I'm thinking about it, like aunts are your parents' siblings, so why would they not? You'd think that should be like kind of roughly closer to Peter's parents.
Yeah, that's good.
So I'm always like, why are they like? Why was she portrayed as so old? I get like that might come across as just to distinguish, him not having actual parents and having an older relative, like kind of be his caretaker. But she is like much older than you'd think. Like his parent would be, just like looking at, like Toby's age and him being a high school student, his parents would, roughly be somewhere in probably their like late 30s to early 50s.
Right.
But she appears as to be like in her mid 60s. I always found it like
Yeah.
odd, but so I think the Marissa Tomei casting as Aunt May in the MCU was actually really spot on.
Yeah, I agree with you a bit like there as far as like I guess the age thing too, because she like it seems like Marissa Tomei as an aunt would be more age appropriate compared to
like she could be Tom Holland's mom for all I know.
I know, you're right,
and therefore it could be his aunt.
Now they did use the fact that Marissa Tomei looks great for her age. That was like they use it as a running joke across all of those movies that she was in.
I love when Tony sees her for the first time.
Yeah, I love that movie too. But there's a moment with Rosemary Harris where I think it's like after the birthday party, and she gives him the $20. And then she kind of breaks down and says like, "Don't you give it back?" Like that moment, like was like she really sold the emotion of that, and I think like that is why I think that at least the elderly part of that character works a bit more because you also feel for her in a different way than like Marissa Tomei playing the role in the Tom Holland movies, and she got to be involved in some of the action, so that was cool too.
And apparently, she did some of her own stunts, whatever those were. I don't know. I don't think that she was hoisted up in the air by the chemical arms, but somewhere in there, she did some of her own stunts, which she said that she actually really enjoyed doing.
Yeah,
but good for her. And she just passed away like not that long ago, right? Like within the last like 2 or 3 years. I gotta look it up now.
I think so.
It's funny when you look her up. It says actress from Spider-Man 2. That's funny. Wait a minute. IMDb doesn't have her death date. There's no way. She's born in 1927.
I know she is still alive.
She's still okay. Whoa! I could have sworn I saw that she passed away.
She's 96. Right.
Oh my word! What did I see? Maybe it was a quote or something that she came out with, or I don't know. I could have sworn I thought she was dead. Never mind then. I thought she
in all serious. I thought she was too. And like, no, we were not trying to off the actress who played Aunt May prematurely. I just thought she was. I also thought she.
Maybe I dreamt it or something, or maybe it was something to do with Marissa Tomei. Like I don't know.
Actually dying at that. On it. And I mean, I thought she was. I thought she had passed away too. But no, she's very good in the movie.
Okay, never mind.
Quite enjoy her as well. I also remember too, like when I was watching it, like scenes that got like a big applause when we saw it in theaters. I remember the end of the train scene got a big round of applause from the opening day crowd when we saw it in theaters, and then also Kirsten Dunst dropping the "Go Get Him, Tiger" at the end of the movie, because that's like a Mary Jane catchphrase. So everyone was like, "Oh, she said it!" and like everyone was like all excited. That took me back to because it is a really cool like when they say stuff that's like from like the source material, like every nerd in there is like, yeah,
yes. So okay, do people still clap in movie theaters today as much as they did? Have you experienced that?
The last time that I experienced that was probably actually during No Way Home was the last time I experienced that.
That or Endgame for me.
And I know that it happened a lot during Endgame.
Yeah, many times. It's not something that I see over here because usually, I'm from a much smaller town and my movie theaters aren't usually packed unless it's a massive event film like something like this. But I would love to be in a full packed movie theater with a cheering crowd. It's such a great feeling. But I was just curious if that was a trend that like kind of like has stopped. I bet a film festival would have a lot of that.
Yeah. I do miss that though, because like even when watching this, I was like, there are certain things like if you see it in a crowded theater, with a bunch of like-minded people who are clearly fans of this kind of thing, like that's the kind of I think that's why so many people love going to the movies because it's this great communal thing that you all have in common, even though none of you know each other, and but you're all like fans of this thing, and like that used to happen a lot more when I was younger, and but yeah, it doesn't really happen like a lot at all anymore. There's certain like horror movies I think I see where like there's like reactions and stuff, but a lot of people don't like, applaud or anything. Right. But yeah, I definitely haven't experienced that since No Way Home, and before that, I guess Endgame, and then before that it was. I guess
a lot of it would come down to like movies that have established IP that people were also fans of before, and then like you said, kind of like seeing a moment like her, like Mary Jane. reciting something that her character is known from a comic would be a big moment for people. So I suppose maybe they're just kind of relegated to comic book movies, but
yeah.
Yeah.
And good for her, because I also want to say, because we mentioned this too with like comic book movies and female leads. She does fall into the damsel in distress thing, because like they do use her they do use it, because that was used clearly as a plot device, right? To like kind of like have him kidnap her and like, you know, whatever. But I will say at least her, I mean, this was a problem more so during comic movies during this period and before. It's gotten better since with female characters in these movies, but at least she has more depth of character too. Like she's not just there to be like the girlfriend or almost girlfriend. Like she has her own story arc and her own you know, things that she's dealing with too. So that was the one like difference I noticed, that yeah, she is used as a bit of a plot device to like, you know, she has to be saved at the end, but that's not all she's there for. At least like she brings like a bit more depth to that part, and which I think is important to point out, because a lot, I mean, like you said, you just experienced that with Kim Basinger as Vicky Vale in Batman. She's clearly just the damsel in distress, just screaming every five.
Man.
Like,
don't remind me, but you're right. I appreciate that about her character, is that she's given more to do.
Yeah, not just Now I in the first one, if I remember, she is used a lot as the damsel in distress. Even more so than this one, but I'm glad that's changed a bit though, and that the girls aren't just there to be the girlfriend. in these movies. So you know, do you think, because it is labeled as one of the greatest superhero movies of all time, do you agree with that assessment?
Certainly after this rewatch, I would have probably argued the same thing before. I've mentioned it, you know, when asked this question previously, and like I just think that this most recent watch completely affirms that for me. Certainly, without a doubt, my favorite in this trilogy, even though, like I said, I'm kind of removed from 1 and 3, but this is the one that I keep going back to. I'd say, like, I don't know that I like this as much as I like any of like all 3 of the Dark Knights. Maybe it's the thing is,
that was a tough one. I was gonna ask you that too.
I think I like all the 3 movies in the Dark Knight trilogy more than this. I'd say I'd put it on par with Batman Begins. Nothing's ever going to touch the Dark Knight for me, but like it belongs in that conversation with those. And I'd say X2 as well.
Oh, there we go. That's when I introduced you to. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. It was an awesome comic book movie, and also I think X2 and Spider-Man 2 are, you know, almost one and the same in how much they elevate their respective series from the first movie. And then there'd probably be a couple MCU movies that I would also enter in like the best comic book movie ever too, like Civil War, and what's the second Captain America movie?
Oh, Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier I'd put up there too. But yeah, without a doubt, like it's timeless, and I think a lot of that comes down to like how it was chosen to be directed, didn't rely on age, like not appropriate, but the CGI and the effects don't relegate it to the time period it was made, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's very clear 20 years later. All the performances are really great, even though it's grounded and it's pretty much well contained to just like Peter's life. I think that elevates this movie a lot and keeps it from suffering from a lot of issues that some more recent comic book movies have, where we're kind of seeing the same story over and over and over again. I think sometimes it's great just to kind of rewind and go back to the smaller stakes. And I'd say that about all 3 of these movies, with like Spider-Man 3 being maybe the exception. But to put it bluntly, absolutely one of my favorites and one of the best, if you ask me. Comic book adaptations, superhero movies, however you want to word it, it's definitely up there. I know you're a fan of it too. I'm not anticipating you disagree.
No, I guess too, like what I'll add to that is, and what I don't think you see in a lot of comic book movies since, I mean, there are some that definitely, you know, are story first, action later. But I love that this, like, there are action sequences and there's stuff that's exciting about it, but it is more story driven, character driven than action driven. And I think some studios would be more afraid to do that now. And they're like, oh, we're going to bore the audience. They're going to bore the audience. We need another action scene here. Like,
especially considering the landscape we're in, right?
Yeah, like there's too much time in between action scenes. We need another one. And that's what I was noticing when I was watching it today. I was like, oh, this is more of a real like character driven drama than like just a comic book action movie. And I think that works to its benefit, and that's probably why a lot of people think it's one of the best ones ever made, because it, like you said, it elevates, you know, a lot from that first movie. I mean, the first movie is good, and I will never take that away from it. But this was, you know, this is great. They really had. I think they kind of, and I think when you have also the confidence that comes with like having a hit right before, you know, you go into the second one, the first one made a ton of money, you can go into it with a bit more confidence. And I think they did with this one, and probably why they weren't afraid to like do something that was more story and character driven, because they're like, we already have the audience, like you know, we don't really need to win them over too much more. Let's try to like focus on story rather than, you know, spectacle. And I think that was important.
So to maybe ask you a more challenging question, instead of getting the same answer I just gave, I'll ask you, how do you stack this up against X2? What's the winner? What's the better sequel?
and you know I love X2.
I know you love X2.
Because I think I said on our episode that I think that it is one of the better not just sequels, but like comic book movies, and it doesn't really get named a lot. It gets named by people that love it.
Right. The X-Men, you're right, are kind of left in the dust sometimes.
A little bit. I mean, and they're not all bad. I mean, there are some bad ones in there, but like there's some really good ones in the mix.
And there's no wrong answer. You just tell. I just want to know what you think.
Right. I feel like I'm cheating by saying it this way. I think Spider-Man 2 is a better movie overall. But I could probably get more repeat watches out of X2. Like I could throw that on more than I would put on Spider-Man 2, and that's not even the detriment. I still love watching. I had a blast watching it today. I also think like in a similar way, like X2 elevates the stakes too. Like, you know, not just giving Wolverine the bulk of the things to do, but you have the stuff with Jean Grey. There's more like character stuff for like everyone in the second one. Right. And like it feels more like you're watching a movie about the team and not just about Wolverine, I guess.
True.
So there's things that it does better. But I would give the slight edge that Spider-Man 2 is a better film by like this much. By a smidge.
All right. So with that being said, then are you ready to give your rating of this movie?
Yes.
Let's hear it. I'll let you go first.
All right. This might change later, guys. But right now, the way I'm feeling, I think I'm gonna just go 4.5.
Okay.
Out of the 5. A part of me wanted to give it 5, but I think there was. I don't know, man. Fuck.
Like, I think it's perfect for the time it came out.
Yeah,
like, in the grand scheme of film, maybe not perfect, but perfect 2000s comic book movie. I would say it would earn a 5 in that respect.
Yeah. You know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna give it a 5.
Give it a 5.
Why the fuck not?
5. If you think it's a 5, then give it a 5.
Yeah, I'll give it a 5. I mean, I didn't find anything wrong with it. It's really well written and well acted. Yeah, it raises the stakes from the first movie. And I love that, you know. Also, like I said earlier, it feels like it's a Peter Parker movie first, and Spider-Man movie second. And then realizing as the movie goes on, like those two worlds need to be together because, you know, the city needs him, that kind of thing. Right. You know, I know these aren't like superhero movies have dabbled in this stuff before, but some do it better than others, and I think this one does it better than most. So, you know what? Like you said, fuck it, I'll give it 5 out of 5.
Why not?
All right, what about you?
I'm gonna give it a 4.5, and I'm comfortable there. Like I love it. That's almost as high praise as I give any comic book movie. I don't think it really gets higher there for me, with the exception of maybe The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Like that movie's flawless to me. This is just like tedious little things, like some inconsistencies with some of like the powers of the characters, maybe a little bit rush. I know I didn't really comment on it throughout our commentary in the movie, but there are some scenes not really to the movie's detriment too much, but if I'm going to nitpick, I'd say maybe Doc Ock's motivations and his transition from good to evil feel a little bit rushed. Like they could have used a couple scenes to pad that.
Yeah.
And what else? And again, like, I mean, I don't know, sometimes James Franco just doesn't always sell it for me. So I'd say he kind of like loses maybe a quarter of a star for him alone. Although I think he's perfectly fine, but Yeah, 4.5. And it's like really, really great score, I think. And this movie, I am honestly anticipating. What I need to do next is just watch 1, 2, 3 back to back to back sometime in the future. Because again,
I haven't done that in a while.
Really far removed from 1, and even more so from 3. So I think that'd be really great. But I don't really need to rewatch 2 anymore. I watched it twice in 3 years, I think now.
Yeah,
that just goes to show, like, I keep coming back to this movie and this trilogy more than any others. But with our scores out of the way, just really quickly before we wrap up, I wanted to ask if you have seen or are aware of Sam Raimi's other dabble into superhero movies. In the 90s, he worked with Liam Neeson on Darkman.
Darkman?
Yeah, have you seen that?
I love
Darkman. Oh, great. I don't know if we
ever
mentioned it before, but I have it on Blu-ray. I haven't seen it yet, though.
I just got the 4K, and I love Darkman. I kind of laid the ground of, like, a studio being like, oh, I think he could do a Spider-Man. Like, look what he did with this.
I figured that played into him getting Spider-Man.
But there's some damn good action sequences in that, and Liam Neeson is so good in it too. I always forget that Frances McDormand's in it. She's the girl, the main woman in the movie. But it's so good and so well done. Yeah, I love that movie.
I've never seen it, but I was out and about somewhere getting movies one day, and Cam's like, yeah, you have to get this Sam Raimi superhero movie before Spider-Man with Liam Neeson. And so I got it, and I love the cover of it too. It looks so great.
Oh, the fire background thing.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think it's pretty underrated too. I mean, I think it became a cult classic later down the line. But yeah, it's really, really
it's a little earlier than I thought too, 1990.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And, a lot of people agree with our assessments about Spider-Man 2. It's a 93% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It got an A- cinema score from opening day audiences. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars out of 4, calling it the best superhero movie since the modern genre was launched with Superman in 1978. And he praised the film for effortlessly combining special effects and a human story, keeping its parallel plots alive and moving. He later called it the 4th best film of 2004 as well.
Wow. Pretty high praise from Raj himself.
Yeah. And then in 2018, Film School Regis called it the best summer movie ever and said that its emotional and calculated story stands above the modern summer flicks like those of The Avengers and The Dark Knight. Writing for The Independent in 2019, Al Horner believed the film to be the definitive superhero movie that laid the blueprint for the entire modern superhero genre as well.
I buy that. That's one thing I want to mention too, is it feels very much like a summer blockbuster movie. All 3 of them do.
Yeah, I mean, that the summer that Spider-Man, the first one, came out, I believe Attack of the Clones also came out.
Oh yeah, you're right. Same year,
and I just remember being like, because people weren't too thrilled with Phantom Menace, and they definitely weren't really thrilled with Attack of the Clones. And I remember Spider-Man like owned that whole summer. It made more money, had a bigger opening weekend than Attack of the Clones. Like,
wow,
it was a huge movie that summer. And no one was expecting it to really top a Star Wars movie, but they ended up doing that.
When did The Two Towers come out?
Second. That's a good question.
Lord of the Rings, because that would have been probably one of the biggest movies that year too. It must not have been competing with Spider-Man though.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, probably not. I have to look it up. Yeah, that'd be interesting to know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that was a great summer, and it was a great summer when this one came out too. Yeah. And it made a lot of money. $795.9 million worldwide on a $200 million budget. Now what's crazy? It grossed a little less than the first movie. A lot of people love it, and it was really well received. I wonder why it grossed a little less. Maybe more competition than the summer of 2004. But not that it flopped by any means. But I was surprised that the way it was received, the way it was received, it makes it seem like it maybe could have done a little bit better than the first one. I know the third one made made more money. Just because everyone was so excited after seeing the second one.
After the second,
and nope. Yeah, surprised by that. But yeah, I agree with you. It feels like a big summer blockbuster movie. I think it deserves its mantle as being one of the best superhero movies ever made. And kind of wish some of these were made like these today. And I mean, there's some bad things about the early 2000s comic movies, but there's some
no doubt. Some of the worst ones we got
there's some
that
really
time.
Good things though about them, and this is a good example. I mean, like you said, X2 is another good example of it.
I think we're on the cusp of kind of a retro sort of approach to comic book movies going forward. I really do think, and like obviously both DC and Marvel in some capacities at least are struggling with their content lately. I think DC's kind of got a little niche with their kind of standalone stuff with Matt Reeves' Batman and their Joker. But honestly, when I think about what I've seen most recently, the scene in No Way Home when Tom Holland's Peter Parker is forgotten about and forced to go out. The movie ends with him kind of going back to his low-key suit with the police scanner, just swinging from buildings, no tech. That was like the best part of that entire trilogy to me, was how that last one ended. And I would love to see them kind of ride that and kind of come back down to the grounded superhero stories, but we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I actually liked that too. That was like I think the best moment in the movie. I also thought it was brave to end it on at least on a dour note like that. Like,
true.
The love of his life forgets him, his best friend. And like that moment where he goes to the diner to, like, he has that note and he's gonna like try to remind her of who he is, and then he kind of realizes that they're both happy. Him,
better off without him.
Yeah. It was so sad, but I was like, oh, that was brave to do it that way. I mean, not a typical way to end like a big
blockbuster. I'll give him credit for that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I guess that wraps up
I think so.
This episode, our final June anniversary that we recorded on July 8th, guys. Like,
thanks for your patience, everyone.
Thanks for your patience, and I'm happy to do this one. It was a fun revisit for me. It seems like it was even though you had probably a more recent revisit of it than I did, probably still a fun one for you.
Oh, no.
And now we are gearing up fully for our July anniversaries. We have the Blair Witch Project for you coming up. Eyes Wide Shut. This is Jackson's pick, and a really good one. And then we also have American Pie. That'll probably
I can't wait for that.
That'll probably finish out the whole 1999 teen movie thing that we had going on the show for anniversaries. And then you'll have your picks by the time this episode comes out. But the three that you were choosing from were True Lies, The Village, and Drop Dead Gorgeous. Drop Dead Gorgeous is currently winning. Just Jackson would love if True Lies got a few more votes.
I just really want to. I've never seen that movie, so that's what I was really banking on will win. But we'll see when it's all said and done.
Yeah, but we're looking forward to doing those, and we're looking forward to whatever you pick as your listening pick for July. And as always, thank you guys for listening. If you want to check out the show, you can get it wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Wherever you want to go, good pods. But you have to also probably find us in the playlist studio app, because they are our network and they're lovely and they treat us really well. If you would like to see our handsome faces, you can go to our YouTube page and also subscribe there to catch the episodes as well. And they're doing another big dub of our episodes on the YouTube page this week. Nice. So those will be there as well. Jackson, as always, always a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise, my friends.
Making Mondays after the very long holiday weekend a lot more bearable. So yeah, always a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, awesome. Excited to chat in our future July episodes. But yes, thanks for making such a great episode. Revisiting Spider-Man 2. It was a blast. I'm going to go vote for True Lies on our story. So we'll see you later, guys.
he's about to rig the system, guys.
Yep. I'll be the first to admit it.